This episode contains a discussion centered around a very sensitive topic. Specifically, the discussion touches upon a sexual harassment allegation which ultimately could not be proven. If such a discussion triggers or distresses you, we advise that you skip this episode entirely or use the timestamps to navigate through it. Viewer discretion is advised. We hope you will not take this episode and its contents out of context. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. It's your boy Moss, back with another episode of The Scholar and the Student. We've got a very special guest for you lined up as always. Let me just bring up the profile picture. There he is, people. And no, this is not Photoshop. I'm not shilling. He actually did give a TED talk. Let me bring him up side by side so he can tell you more about that and everything else we've got planned. Please welcome to the show, Tumisang Ramarea. Welcome to the show, brother. It's nice to have you on finally.
Thank you, my brother. I have been looking forward to this opportunity since the first time you invited me to come on the show. So I'm really excited, to share about my journey from bots to giving that TED Talk that you mentioned and more.
Excellent. So without any further ado, I'm sure everyone is dying to know who exactly you are after I brought up that picture of the actual TEDx logo and then you were there in front. So tell us everything, how it started. Okay, I'm sure you don't really know much about what happened at the hospital and how you were born, so we'll skip that part. But let's get straight to your earliest memories, if I should say, if it's even relevant. Start from the beginning and tell us how you ended up in the US of A, of all places, because you got stuck there thanks to this lockdown, and how you ended up giving that TED Talk.
Well, I'm actually going to start with the day I was born because, I like to joke that I'm a very special person because I was born, because Nelson Mandela chose to have his inauguration on the same day I was born. So, fun fact, I was born on the same day that Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first president of South Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, but, I was born into like a modest family in Kanye. I have 7 siblings, like 4 brothers and 3 sisters. I'm almost the baby, 7th born. But, most of my older siblings are actually significantly older than myself. So I grew up mostly with my little brother. And I think most of my earlier years mostly comprised of school because that's all there was to do in Kenya, like go to school, come back, play with friends, that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things that were very clear in the very beginning was that I was academically gifted. And so, one of my brothers taught me to read and write before I even started school. And so, I started reading everything I could get my hands on. And then even when I got to school, because I was already ahead of everyone else, my teachers would also give me extra things to read just to keep me occupied. Because sometimes I was a naughty child, so sometimes it was important for them to keep me entertained and the like. And I think, all of that really contributed to, this idea that I was an academically gifted kid and made me even more academically gifted. So I think one of the things that, a lot of people said, a lot of relatives, when they would come visit my house, was this idea that I was going to study abroad. Like people felt that I was just too smart, that I could get into universities like Oxford and Cambridge and the like. And I remember when I was young, my brother and I used to argue about which of those 2 schools I should go to, like whether I should go to Oxford or I should go to Cambridge. And then, in fact, the listeners might be interested to know this, that I met you, Moss, through debate. So I think
Absolutely.
Debate was a big part of my, schooling years, especially from junior secondary school onwards. It was, I've always really been interested in discussing different topics, keeping up with current affairs and just really, thinking about our world and ways that our world can be improved. And I mean, it has been an honor to meet a lot of talented people, such as yourself, Moss,
Yeah.
who challenge me, who inspire me, and who do a lot of really amazing and great things, But I think overall, those first few years, it was just me, school, and my teachers and my family really pushing me to be the best that I could. I think that set a great foundation for the rest of my story and the rest of my journey.
Wow, that is wow, it's I don't even have any words to properly describe the way I felt just listening to all of that. So academically gifted from the very beginning, and I have very vivid memories of the first day we met. It was in Palape, which is well, I know I've got a very complicated backstory, but Palape is the place, as I mentioned in the last episode. By the time this is released, you'll be able to listen to that episode as well. Palape is the place where I became a man. And I'm sorry if that sounds sexist, it really should not. But that's the place where I actually got those qualities of what makes me who I am today. So, yes, we met for the first time in Palape, and we were actually competitors. We were competing to be on Botswana's national debate team. That was back in the year 2012, if I remember correctly, towards the end of 2012.
That is correct.
Yes.
That is correct.
So, okay, before I move any further, because I remember we met before anything had started properly that day. And I think I was just chilling outside one of the rooms or something because, well, you guys all stayed over at the school, which was Lotsane, a very prominent school in Palape. Everyone should know it. Since I lived in Mahalape, and I still kind of do. It's where my parents are. So I used to go to school every day by bus. So I just told the driver that day to drop me off in Botswana instead of taking me all the way to Kaswe. So what was your first impression, out of curiosity's sake, of me when you saw this guy with, I don't even know what my hair was like back then. Definitely not as long as it is now. I did have something of a beard though. So what was your first impression when you saw this guy looking the way he is and looking like he sticks out like a sore thumb? Were you wondering, did he get lost or something? What was your first impression?
Well, I mean, actually, my first impression of you, or the first time I saw you, was not at those selections. So I think the first time I saw you, even though you and I didn't interact, was a few months earlier at the, I think it was like the national debate competition. I think it was in Radicele or something like that.
Yes,
Um,
that's right. Okay, I actually
and
did not know that you were there because there were so many people who ended up in Lotsane who were not at Radicile, so I kind of just assumed you would be one of them because it's a very funny story. But anyway, so okay, you first saw me in Radicile. Okay, that's even more interesting because
right.
I had no idea you were
Yeah.
watching me. So what was your first impression back then?
So I remember like watching you debate in your team, and I remember being very impressed. I was like, wow, I like this guy, because I think one of the things that used to frustrate me about debate is that there are really two types of debaters that I came across in bots. There are people who focus on debating ideas, and then there are people who tend to focus on very superficial things like delivery style or those things that don't really matter to the argument. And I remember being very impressed by how well you crafted your points and really the clarity with which you delivered them. And I remember being like very impressed. And obviously, I came from a public school, and I think you went to Kaso, which I'm assuming is a private school.
Yeah.
And there was sort of this, I'm sure you know of this. There's sort of this, there are these stereotypes between private school and public school kids, right? So like I felt like there was some sort of divide between your world and my world, which is why I was very impressed when I met you in Lozani, and you were actually a very friendly guy. And I was like, oh, I really like this guy. I enjoyed like talking with you and just really discussing different things. So, the stereotype, or at least the assumptions that I had made about, you probably, as a result of you going to a private school, I assumed you're not going to be a friendly guy, or you're not going to want to associate with, public school kids like myself. But in the end, that was not the case, and I was very impressed. And this is why also, like, even beyond debate, you and I have kept in touch, right? Because I really enjoy this friendship and being able to, talk with you about different things.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, to come back to that point of private versus public school, I know a couple of people, even teachers in private school, for whom those stereotypes are absolutely real. Because after I finished like studying at Kaswe, I'm sure a lot of people know by now, I started helping out mentoring kids and all that. And one of the things we tried to do was kind of get public schools and private schools together and have a sort of competition, because at the end of the day, if private school kids just stick to their private school circle, they're not getting enough exposure. And whether people like to hear this or not, but public schools in Botswana at the very least, when it comes to debate and public speaking, they get more exposure, more training on any given week in those activities than any private school kid will get. Because for myself, when it came to debate and public speaking, I only had one period a week, which is maybe 45 minutes at most. That was either on Friday or Wednesday, depending on the school year and all those kinds of things. Whereas I'm sure in public school, you can correct me about this, but it's usually different, because I was told by Justice Mutlabani, who had a lot of interaction with public schools, that they debate pretty much every day for like an hour straight, because it's their afternoon activity. And they do afternoon activities after school every single day. So already you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. And a lot of my friends, of course, even when we went to that actual competition, you know, some people had this idea that, oh, people from public school, they don't speak English as good as we do and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to blaze through the competition, which turned out to be absolutely wrong, because my team was the one that was getting blazed left, right, and center more times than we care to actually admit. So those stereotypes are definitely real. But yeah, I'm glad that you had a good first impression of me. Interestingly enough, that was my first time doing World Schools debate, because, yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yes, I mean, interesting enough, private schools, for all that it's worth and for all the bragging rights they want to claim, they at least, well, until that time, now it's changed, they used to have the long man style of debate. I'm sure you know what that is. You got four speakers.
I hated that style.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Yeah, well, not that I hated it, but I dispreferred it to the WSDS. But continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, especially after I started debating World School style, those competitions became such a breeze for me. So I just got best speaker every time after I got my exposure in Radicile and all that. So I don't know why you think that I was able to craft points so efficiently, but I'm not sure I actually understand what I was doing back there. But okay, it is what it is, I guess. I mean, we've progressed much further ever since that point in time. So coming back to your story, so you were academically gifted, and then somewhere down the line, I saw on Facebook that Tumisang Ramarea now studies in Costa Rica. And okay, that sounds really random, but how did you end up in a place like Costa Rica?
Yeah, actually, the story is as random as it sounds. So, you know, one of the things, I mean, you know this. So in Botswana, there's what is called the Top Achiever Scholarship. And so, you know, at the end of your general certificate of secondary education, if you do really well, the government can pay for you to go do your A-levels or your IB diploma somewhere. And they sort of usually like a catch. There's like a certain threshold that you have to, you know, overcome in order to qualify for that scholarship. Academically gifted as I was, I missed that threshold by 1 point. You know, and so I had spent like 2.5 years aiming for this scholarship, like working hard, going to school almost every day, like in the last few months before that exam. And in the end, I came up short by 1 point. And I was very sad, you know, because it felt to me like the end of the world. It felt like I was not, you know, everything that I had worked hard for, all those relatives asking me if I wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge, it didn't matter anymore, you know. Not to say that going to the University of Botswana would have been the worst case scenario, because it's a pretty good school.
Absolutely.
But because I feel like I had not imagined that I was going to do that, right? Like I had always just assumed that I was going to go abroad. So one of my friends, her name is Kaho Fitlile, I think she came across this advert about the United World Colleges, um, and she passed it on to me because she was fed up about me complaining every day about how I had failed and my life was over. And the UWC schools, which is the school I went to in Costa Rica, they're really like a group of schools around the world that brings promising leaders or promising young leaders, and really like uses education as a tool to help them think about ways they can contribute to their communities once they are done with school. And when I applied to UWC, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, because it felt to me like this is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to school in the UK or in the US because, when we are young, we are told to believe that the West is everything. Now I know better, of course, having lived here. I know that, it's not as promised. Um, but I applied to UWC and then I got admitted to the school in Costa Rica. So the way that it works is you actually don't apply to a specific country. You just apply in general to all the schools, and then you get nominated to the different schools. And if a school likes you, then they admit you. So the first time I learned about the country Costa Rica was when I got my admission letter. So it's like I get this letter that's like, oh, you're going to school in Costa Rica. And then I'm like, great, where is that again? So I had to Google Costa Rica. And then, in the beginning, I was not completely sold. And I think like it sort of took a little while, like, reading about the country. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to go there, I think what attracted me the most to the country was just how green all the pictures I saw were, proximity to the ocean. Botswana is a very dry desert. So I think I was very excited by the prospect of living very close to an ocean. I had never seen an ocean up to that point in my life. So, that was very, very intriguing and interesting. And man, what an experience it was. I think, when I went to UWC, I came from being the big fish in a small pond, right? Because in my village, I was arguably the smartest kid, depending on who you asked. But when I got to the school in Costa Rica, everyone was the best where they came from, right? And so now suddenly I'm now in an ocean. I'm no longer the big fish in a small pond. And then I also I think got to learn a lot about myself, because I think prior to leaving my country, my identity was really built around being an academically gifted student and being a great debate student, right? Because it was all around my intellectual abilities. But then you get to a place where now everyone is smart, so that doesn't distinguish you from everyone else, right? Like being smart is nothing special. And so I think this is what really enabled me to really pause and figure out, who am I outside of academics? Who am I outside of debate? And I discovered that actually I was an artistic person. That I like to doodle. I like to write a lot. I realized that I just enjoy the process of reflecting on different things and just thinking about different things outside of academics and the formal learning space. And I also realized that I enjoy spending time with people. I enjoy community. And so I think in that regard, I think Costa Rica was a great experience and really helping me realize that there's more to life than just school.
Excellent. And the unfortunate reality is many people have that realization long after they have left school, and it's usually some life circumstance that forces them to wake up, and now their life is almost a mess, or they've gone into some sort of crisis because, yes, they have this big shot degree, they've got a lot of cash, for example, but they can't figure out who they are, and they can't figure out how they fall into this puzzle that's called the world. Where do they fit in this giant jigsaw? But thankfully, you were able to find that out when you went to Costa Rica, but you didn't stay in Costa Rica. You did your IB in Costa Rica, and then you ended up in the Stanford University, not a funny. I mean, sometimes people in Botswana will think like we've got a Clifton College here, and college has got so many like applications of what that can mean. But no, it's not some phony Stanford University that someone opened up in his backyard. Tumisang here ended up going to the Stanford University, the famous one that you guys have all heard of or read about or seen in some weird movie over there. Tell us how you ended up from Costa Rica going to Stanford University, and how did you end up choosing the course which you finally settled on?
So the journey to Stanford is actually a very interesting one because so remember I spent all those years when I was in Botswana trying to get the top achiever scholarship, and then I failed to get it. And I think that really affected my self-confidence and self-esteem. My confidence took a blow from that failure to get the top achiever scholarship. And so when it was time to apply to universities when I was in Costa Rica, I was very conservative in my choices. I was choosing schools where I felt that I could definitely get in. So like schools you probably never heard of. Schools like University of Oklahoma, McAllister College. I mean, they're still great schools, but they're not schools that me from a few years ago would have like aspired to apply to, right? And then, by some random, I don't even know what inspired that thought. Like the deadline was fast approaching to submit all applications. And then I think I had a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about regret or something. And then I started thinking, what if I regret not applying to Stanford? Because Stanford was a school that I wanted to go to because one of my friend's sister, Tumisang Ramarea, had gone there, and so I knew somebody who had gone there, and it was a school that I really liked. And so I started wondering, what if one day I regret not applying to this school? Because if I don't apply, then I'm absolutely not gonna get in. But if I apply, there's a chance I might not get in, but there's also that chance that I might get in. So as sort of like some last minute, afterthought, I decided I'm not gonna let my previous failures sort of stop me back from pursuing my dream. So I applied to Stanford, and I was so nervous on the day that the admission results came out because I was not sure if I was gonna get in. And in fact, I was convinced I was not gonna get in. And I remember, I got the email sometime in the afternoon, and I didn't open it until the evening when my roommates came in, and they were the ones who opened it, and they started screaming that like, oh, I got into Stanford. And I thought they were like, it was some prank, where they were just trying to make me feel better. But I found out that I actually did get into Stanford. And not only that, I also got the MasterCard Foundation scholarship to attend Stanford, which is like this really, prestigious scholarship that is given to academically gifted students, usually from Africa, who come from, underprivileged backgrounds to really, help them afford high quality university education, both on the African continent and abroad. And I think, I felt very honored and very privileged to receive that scholarship, which was funny, right? To think back, like, if I had gotten the Top Achiever scholarship as I had hoped, I probably would not have, definitely would not have gotten the MasterCard Foundation scholarship. And also, maybe would have gone a different path, would have gone to the UK. Because I think at the time, my thinking was like, oh, I should go to the UK. But I realized later on that I prefer the US university system than the UK university system, because in the UK, with the UK system, you have to decide beforehand what it is you're going to study, apply into that program, and you get admitted into that program and you stick to it. But with the US system, you kind of apply generally into the university, and there's a lot of flexibility and room to figure out what it is you want to do. So, for example, when I came into Stanford, I thought I was going to study econ. I thought I was going to do economics. And the reason for that was that I had an excellent economics teacher in IB, Heidi Chong. I love Heidi, who really inspired me so much that I was almost convinced that I wanted to study econ. But pretty soon I realized that my true interest was in mathematics than in econ. And so I started taking a few mathematics classes. But even that, it felt too theoretical for my liking. I love math, but I don't like math for math's sake. I think of mathematics as this beautiful tool that you can use to represent different things in the world, and therefore it lends itself as a means of solving problems. So I realized that it's not that I was interested in mathematics, I was interested in using mathematics to solve some problems in society. And that is how I ended up actually in management science and engineering, right? Because the way I think of management science and engineering is basically just, applied mathematics, using mathematics and engineering tools and systems to frame most of society's problems and just, solve them. And I think that, I felt it's one of those things where you stumble into something and you're like, oh my goodness, this is what I have been trying to find. It's like, because sometimes we know what we want to do, but we don't know what it looks like until we get to that point where we're like, yes. And this is why, even after getting my bachelor's degree in this same field, I decided I was going to, pursue my master's degree in the same thing. I mean, granted, now I'm tired of school and I want to be done. But, it's like, it's a field that I feel so strongly about. And I feel like I have learned a lot. And once I leave from here, I'm about to graduate this coming June. I feel prepared and ready to really, join the world and start hopefully, contributing significantly to advance to really advancing our world and hopefully ending the injustice and inequities that exist in it.
Excellent. In case Mr. Tumisang Ramarea ends up being a future president of Botswana, at least I can say that, hey, I've known him for a long time, and yes, he started saying all these inspirational things here. Well, actually, to be honest, he started publicly saying this, and when I say publicly, I mean to a wide reaching audience from that TED Talk. So tell us about that TED Talk. Did that happen in Costa Rica or in the US of A? Because it's been a few good years since I did watch it, but it was, like I said, it's been a good few years, so I don't remember everything about it. And also, jumping on from that, you talked about masters. I mean, I'm pretty much in the same phase right now that I have passion for my area of study, but university is just taking a toll on me. I don't want to study like this anymore. I mean, if it's just for exams and getting another degree, I'm not sure if I necessarily want to do that. But there are some subjects you study them and you're like, hey, this is really interesting. And if I actually go deeper into this, I can impact the world in a positive way. So how do you deal with these conflicting feelings? But let's start from the TED Talk first.
Right. So yeah, the TED Talk, I gave it in 2014 in Costa Rica. Yeah, that was during my first year in Costa Rica, and it was basically about the story of my life from up to that point, and the talk focuses on two key things, right? So the first thing that it focuses on is, so when I was in my teen years, I went and lived with a brother of mine, and that experience and really living there was not a very conducive environment. Like it was there was a lot of at least in my opinion, it was an abusive environment. And in fact, at some point, I thought about taking my own life. That's like how bad it was, right? Because it was like this environment where at 11 years old I was expected to do all these adult responsibilities, like cooking almost daily, taking care of a baby who was barely 1 year old when the parents went and enjoyed their days of youth. And really it was about how that experience, difficult as it was, really built a spirit of resilience within me. And I know that we tend to romanticize trauma and resilience. And I really hope that people don't take that from this as to say, like, when you're going through something terrible, to be like, oh, at least you get resilience from it. I think that you know there shouldn't be violence to begin with. And so, like, we should still speak up against violence and all of that. So the talk was really me sharing about how I went from that experience, to really apply myself in my academics, because in some sense I saw school as my ticket out, as my tickets to freedom, and my ticket to be my own person, my own individual. And then the second thing was, so I went to Stanford Senior Secondary School, and at least in 2011, oh my goodness, it was not the best school you could go to, at least if you were trying to get a top achievers scholarship. Um, the students, the teachers, people were just, not motivated. And so, like, but I was so committed to my goal of getting this scholarship that I, you know, got a few of my peers together, um, that we were going to focus on our studies. We were going to study in spite of the environment that we were in. And we were very fortunate that the teachers I had, at least believed in my vision. They believed in my goal, and they really did. They went above and beyond to support myself and my study group. They gave us like extra material to review with. They also, I actually had this deal with my teachers where, you know, they could beat me if I got below a certain, like, threshold. I remember, for physics, that threshold was 95%. So if I got anything less than 95%, I was gonna get a beating. And I remember this one time, like, for the longest time, I was able to, like, I was safe. I scored above 95%. And then in this one exam, which was very difficult, like, everyone in the class failed that exam. I think, the second score was like somewhere in the 60s, like 63% or something. And I had gotten a 93%.
Yeah.
I had still done really well. But the deal was, if it's below 95%, you get a beating. I cried that day, because I was like, dude, but now looking back, I'm grateful, that I had that environment that allowed me to thrive, an environment that allowed me to really, you know, get closer to achieving my goals. So the TED Talk was really about, at least the hope behind my decision to give the TED Talk when I was invited to give the talk, was I was hoping that, I could use my story up to that point to inspire people, who maybe were, in positions of despair and hopelessness, to know that, they can, come out of it. Not necessarily to say that it's going to be easy, but that there is hope. And I remember, like, I ended the talk by saying that, the talk was, they should think of it as like, the ink with which they could rewrite the story of their lives, if they thought it was over. Yeah, but it was an honor and a privilege. In fact, my talk was the last at the event, so it was like the closing speech. And there was a lot of pressure that came with it, right? Because it's like, you've had a long day of these wonderful talks by these impressive speakers, and now you have to close, and I sometimes rewatch the talk, and I with all the experience I have now, I feel like I can tell the story better now. Obviously we can always do everything better with time and experience, you know, but I especially feel very honored that, they felt that my story deserved, to be told, and that they gave me that space and platform. And I'm happy that there are still people who come across the talk and draw inspiration from it. So yeah. Wait, what was the second question?
The second question was about balancing these feelings of I want to study for masters, but I don't want to go through university again because university is stress. So how do you move forward when you've got a dilemma like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way I think about it is that school for school's sake would not work for me. If I just went to school for the sake of being in school. I think that school should be approached from a position of curiosity. Like I think that um, when you look at the world around you, you should always question things in the world around you. And from that questioning, the naturally there arises a need to know something or to understand something better, right? And there's many ways to go about satisfying that curiosity. School is just one of them, right? Because you can also just learn from talking with other people, and in fact we do learn from talking with other people. You can learn from like doing an independent study, just like by reading by yourself. And or you can learn by going to school, because school gives you that a structured program, right? And I think that um, the way you should think about it is, if school is the best way that you can satisfy that curiosity or get the skills that you need to satisfy that curiosity, then by all means I think one should go to school. In fact, recently I was like debating whether or not I want to continue on to do a PhD, right? Because there's still a lot of things I don't know about my field. And there's still a lot of skills and tools that I feel like I need to gather. But after some extensive reflection, I actually realized that I have to refine the kinds of questions I want to answer with my life, like that I want to devote the rest of my life to answering. And while school is great, I think that at least in this instance, I can better satisfy this curiosity by actually leaving school and going into the real world and getting a job. And through my job, really trying to understand what are the things that, frustrate me, what are the tools that I feel like I'm lacking in order to deliver the value that I hope to deliver. And then if after some time I still feel like, okay, maybe I need to go back to school to sort of supplement these skills, then I'll do that. But my best guess is probably I'm not even going to need to do that, because I'm going to be like, oh, if I identify something, I can probably just, either experiment, explore it, or talk with other people, And I think this is why also it's very important to have mentors in one's life, because, a lot of times we don't need to go through the whole journey of doing something. We can just rely on other people who have gone through a similar experience and just harness their expertise, because life's too short for all of us to learn everything from scratch on our own. Yeah, so I think for me, I'll just say, the question we should ask is school the best way to go about satisfying this curiosity that I have? If it's not, then discontinue. If it is, then I guess we just have to hang on for a little while. So, yeah, I'm actually kind of curious, like, do you have a pretty good idea of the question that you're trying to, answer with all of your schooling efforts or your scholarly efforts?
Yeah, that's a good way to put me on the spot, because I think prior to hearing you put it so aptly like this, in a way that's digestible and in a way that people can actually make sense of what you said and people can actually apply it to their endeavors in finding what they want to do in life. I've never actually thought about it prior to this, although I've had this vague idea that, you see, the legal systems of the world intrigue me, and it's a no-brainer to say that the skills we picked up in debate and public speaking, of being able to express ourselves and being able to formulate cogent arguments and put them across to the other side, while at the same time still maintaining an open mind to entertain the notion that the other side can be correct. It's a no-brainer to like understand that these are invaluable skills in the courtroom or in the attorney's office, whatever it is, whichever field of law you want to get into. And at the same time, I call this podcast Botswana's first Muslim podcast, and people can take whatever they want from that. And, it's not a secret that I also have a passion for my faith, which is Islam in my case. And I always, I don't think bringing it to the forefront will be an apt way of putting how I perceive my faith. But basically what I'm trying to say, I've always had this vague idea of kind of not reconciling, because there isn't an overt clash in that sense. I mean, as people try to push this clash of civilization kind of narrative. And look, I can understand elements of that being true, but I think by and large, people just misinterpret religion in general, not just Islam, because all religions have been institutionalized, whether we like it or not. There is an actual institution to the way all religions work in the common day and age. So I've always had this idea of, I have to choose my words correctly, of kind of bringing the worlds of the legal systems of the world and Islamic law together in some way. And this is where it gets real complicated, because at the same time, I'm interested in psychology as a field, because I've also gone through a journey of where my mental health took an actual dip. It took a tank. And after that, when I started research, of course I got a therapist and all that, but I also started doing my own research into certain topics and certain subjects. And the more I read about psychology, the more I want not to be a counselor or anything, not to be a therapist, but I think that this is an invaluable field of study that everyone, I would even go as far as saying everyone in the modern world should have some grasp of psychology so that they can conduct themselves in their everyday life. So if I can put it that way, I want to combine the knowledge of law, the knowledge of Islam and Islamic law, and psychology into something. And then there's also this question of what we call ADR, which is a trending thing in the legal world. That means alternative dispute resolution, where instead of trying to get everything to be solved in court, you get the parties to, for example, there are many ways of doing this, sit down and have a mediation or an arbitration. In other words, you try to get them to come to the same agreement before anyone gets to court, before people's emotions run high and the whole thing just goes to chaos. So that's a trending thing in the legal world in general. And I know a couple of law firms in Botswana also engage in ADR, but I'm saying it here first. I've told only my sister before this that I do intend to have a proper institution for ADR in Botswana, and by extension, the one that functions all across Africa. I mean, for starters, and of course after that we can go to the rest of the world. So it's very long and complicated. I hope I'll be able to make proper sense of that as time goes on, but that's where I stand in terms of my academic journey. I'm just waiting on some results, but I'm pretty much done with my bachelor's phase. Now it's basically master's and, well, PhD if we actually get to that stage. I was wondering though, and this is also kind of a question. Have you ever heard of this? Because I was watching some Japanese YouTubers the other day, and in Japan, at least in Japan, it might be a thing in other jurisdictions as well. Instead of doing a master's, there's something called a research degree, where you're pretty much doing what you would be doing for master's, but it's not as intensive, and you don't get that proper qualification or that title next to your name that you would if you did a master's, but you're doing it mostly for the knowledge, as you said. So it's not to become Dr. Tumisang Ramarea or Dr. Mustaqim Habib. It's just to get the knowledge that you would otherwise be pursuing in your master's, but you don't get the title, if I can put it bluntly like that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of it yet, but I do think that it's actually one of the things that often fascinate me is how sometimes people pursue things sort of for the prestige that comes with it, right? Because of the society's values. But I haven't heard of it, and to comment briefly on what you were just saying, actually, the one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is sort of this idea of bringing together different things that you're interested in, that might otherwise appear to be mutually exclusive, almost as though you have to pick one or the other. But I feel like this is one of the things that I think makes us unique as human beings, and like it's what makes humanity beautiful, right? Is that we have such a diversity of interests, and you can have somebody such as yourself interested in like law, psychology, and Islam, and you know and really that's why you are here, right? Like I think that the reason why you are here on this earth is to bring that unique perspective, to bring that unique sort of set of interests, right? And I think a lot of times because I think about it from time to time, I'm this guy who's like you know big into math and these mathematical models, but I'm also like an artist and a poet. I think of myself as an artist and a poet, and at the same time, when I write, I like cooking, like all these different things that society want to box us. And I think that's where the problem comes from, right? It's like society likes boxing people and putting them into categories and things like that. And I think that to truly live is to allow all these multiple truths of ourselves to shine, and of course, like, we don't know how to allow them to shine. I mean, that's why we have to live, right? Like living is figuring it out. And I think that's the beauty of it. And if I've learned anything over the years from my journaling practice, is that it's always okay not to know how to bring together these different things, because but to just continue along the journey of trying to figure it out as you go. So yeah, I'm really like excited for you and your ADR empire aspirations.
Wow.
Because I think that ADR is really important. Like it's very important to have the ability for people to resolve conflicts outside of legal systems, because sometimes bringing like the legal system and the legal process into things can really complicate very simple things, like can blow can blow small conflicts out of proportion, right? And I say this because I actually a few years ago I was in a situation where a friend of mine filed a report against me of sexual harassment, and there was a whole investigation that followed that whole report. But at the end of the formal process, this investigation, there was no charge issued because there was no, there was insufficient evidence that, to suggest that that at least my behavior amounted to sexual harassment. But I think that if there had been an alternative process other than just this legal process of like filing a report, this person, if she didn't feel comfortable coming to me directly, she could have gone through that process, right, to sort of try and mediate some conversation around, you did this thing that made me uncomfortable. So, like, it would have been nice to have sort of that alternative, because I think ultimately the reason behind these legal processes and these legal structures are for justice, right? And I think that, when people, file these reports, it's not that they are being malicious or anything. It's that they want for there to be some acknowledgement that some wrong was done, and for there to sort of be some remedial action if necessary, right? So I really think that you're onto something there, bro, with like this whole trying to build an ADR framework for Botswana and for Africa especially.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, is what I can say. And I was at an ADR webinar not too long ago, and the guy who was speaking was from Singapore, and he said that ADR is actually traditional in Asia and Africa, because once upon a time, before colonialism, before we had a court system, if any two people or more people had a problem, we'd get them to, well, in a way, sit them down and then try to solve the matter from there. It wasn't all about this guy is guilty and he's going to prison and all that kind of stuff. And it's not to bang on the whole justice system, as you said. The purpose of filing court reports or getting an investigation done into any sort of allegation, the end goal at the end of the day is justice. But I know it's a very sensitive topic, but since we've already opened the can of worms, and by the way, viewers, if any of this makes you uncomfortable, you're free to just click off or fast forward, whatever it is. But yes, I mean, coming on to this whole thing of you being falsely accused of sexual harassment, because it's not just me saying it because I'm your friend. The investigation and everything that was done ultimately concluded that you were not at fault. So it was, well, I don't know what the rationale was of the person who made that accusation, and maybe I will never know. But this brings us on to another sort of trend which is problematic in today's time, and that is cancel culture. And not just cancel culture in this case, but this whole thing of if a woman makes a claim against someone, then it's like 90%, there's a 90% chance that it is definitely true and the guy is definitely guilty. And I'm not downplaying genuine cases of sexual harassment or anything of that nature. Anyone who is found guilty must definitely be taken to task in the appropriate manner, whatever the jurisdiction of the country says. And if there are malicious intents in the justice system, those intents and those players must be brought to task. But what is your general thought about this whole trend in the world that we see today?
I mean, I think I'll start first and foremost by really acknowledging that until this case, I was, for the most part, oblivious to really, the extent to which sexual harassment and sexual abuse, especially against women, persist in our society. And I think, and actually, I think I would not really describe this case against me as a false accusation. I think I would say it's more of a misunderstanding, but I wouldn't say that it's a false accusation, just because I think that if you think about it in this context of the way our world has always silenced women, and so in a lot of ways women often endure untold abuses, most of them sexual in nature, but they don't feel empowered enough to report, right? And I think that one of the things that I appreciate about the current moment is that there is some momentum, in really getting more women to, report, these different abuses that come against them, right? Because only actually I think there's some statistic that for every case that's reported, there's probably 5 other cases that are not reported. And I think really the challenge here is for people like you who are in the legal system, right, to really make sure that the legal system is designed in such a way that it can both, investigate thoroughly these accusations or alleged abuses, and where appropriate, provide, sanctions or whatever is necessary. But also, I think that as a society, we should not penalize people for reporting. So we shouldn't penalize both the woman who reports this case. Like if my friend, for example, she felt uncomfortable by something that I did, I think that she shouldn't be penalized for that discomfort, right? Even if in the end the process determines that was not harassment and everything is fine, I think that she shouldn't be punished for that, right? Because I think by punishing people for, reporting that discomfort, we actually stop women from reporting a lot of these things. At the same time, I think we also should not punish people for having accusations brought against them, right? So recently, I became aware actually that there is some list at my school, an illegal list for that matter, of all the black men who have ever had a sexual case against them. Like, it doesn't matter whether like the investigation determined that there was an infraction or not. If you've ever been accused, you're on that list. And I recently found out that because of that, I've been cancelled, and I think that that is counterproductive. I think it is counterproductive to say, oh, Ramarea has been accused of sexual harassment, therefore let's blacklist him, right? Because I think now what ends up happening, and not even like for my sake, I mean, of course, like it's painful for me, and it hurts me that my reputation is being dragged through the mud. But I think it's also even counterproductive to, the progress that's being made to ensure that women are being heard. Because now, if another situation arises, and somebody is not sure whether or not, the thing that happened to them is abuse or harassment, then they are going to choose not to report because they are worried that in case what happened to them is not, harassment enough, according to the legal framework, they're worried that maybe like they might, be ruining their friend's life, right? So I think that that also has that counterproductive effect of not allowing women to talk. So I think that we should have I would rather people report things and then an investigation reveals that that's not the case than they don't. But at the same time, I think as a society, we shouldn't punish both men and women for doing this thing. Now, with respect to cancel culture, as I just told you, that I guess I recently found out that I have been canceled in some circles. To me, I don't think cancel culture is productive. Personally, I think that, the patriarchy and toxic masculinity affect all of us, right? And it is our collective responsibility to really do this difficult work of unlearning, because the patriarchy is upheld by both men and women. And I think this whole cancel culture thing and this polarization in our society, where we are placing the bulk of the responsibility on the men, and just letting women off the hook, for the patriarchy, is also counterproductive. Because now, we end up with a situation where now if I'm canceled, what incentive do I have to continue, interrogating my own privilege as a man, to continue interrogating my own toxicity and unlearn and doing the necessary work to unlearn? What incentive do I have if I'm being cancelled, right? I think that we need to stand together, like both men and women, to really do this difficult work of interrogating what is it that we do, why do we do it this way, right? Because as you sort of suggested, like we have this whole we have our civilization, modern civilization. We have also our traditions that are maybe sometimes rooted in religion, and because of this whole institutionalization actually of religion, there's a lot of people also who use all of these different social institutions to continue this abuse and all these different things, right? But if we create an environment where we can really come together to interrogate these things and have like honest dialogues, I mean, have uncomfortable conversations where necessary, but I think we stand a better chance if we do this thing. So personally, I'm against cancel culture because I think cancel culture is not helping anyone. I'm against this polarization of saying like, sexism or sexual abuse against women is entirely men's fault. Yes, men have a bigger role to play because oftentimes they are the perpetrators. So I agree they have a bigger role to play, but it's our collective responsibility. Same thing, in the US, I'm not going to go into detail into this, but another thing that's really big in the US is like there's a lot of racial tensions in the US, right? And I think that, racism, even though oftentimes, white people tend to benefit more from racism, I think it's also not productive to say, oh, it's white people should focus on their white privilege and black people are okay, because all of us play a role in upholding these structures and oppressive institutions. And so like, therefore, we shouldn't like be polarized. We should just work together to end all of these things. So, I mean, yeah. So back to my specific case, like, yeah, I think I'm actually glad that my friend filed that case against me, because on the one hand, it validated the discomfort that she felt, but it also provided a signal to me that I need to check my behavior. I need to check my privilege, right? And even though in the end, I mean, of course, the investigation revealed that, that was not harassment. I think that the world is better because I'm now, actively working to really unlearn and do the difficult work. And it's not easy. And I'm nowhere close to like, figuring it out and knowing what's the right thing to do.
I mean, your maturity speaks for itself, brother. I mean, the way you just handled this very difficult situation that you've been handed, it's honestly commendable. Can you think of any, since you said you're against cancel culture, can you think of any positive ramifications that cancel culture may have had anywhere in the world? Because the only thing that comes to my mind are negative things. I mean, okay, I'll give you this example since it's all over the internet now and many people know about it as well. I don't know how deeply you are into anime, but okay, so basically there's, well, everyone knows what Dragon Ball Z is, but basically Dragon Ball Super, and the what do you call, the company that does the dubbing, the English dubbing for Dragon Ball and many other anime in the US is called Funimation. And notwithstanding, a lot of people call them, now they call them SJWs and liberal snowflake and that kind of stuff. Okay, I'll tell you where that all originated. So, about 2 years ago, there was a new Dragon Ball movie that came out, Dragon Ball Super Broly, but the movie or the content of it has got nothing to do with this discussion. The thing is that
Right.
one of the voice actors, and he's a pretty damn good voice actor. Oh, I don't know what he's doing now because he's no longer in this field, but he was the voice of one of the characters in that movie, Vic Mignogna. He was the voice of Broly, and one of the female actors, we're talking about the English voice cast now, this has got nothing to do with Japan, just so people hone in on this. So she allegedly said that he did something which amounted to sexual harassment. And after she said it, because she's such a prominent actress, voice actress, many other voice actresses also came out. And the only things that came out of this whole discourse was that you got two camps in the Dragon Ball fandom, or the anime fandom in general. You got one camp that cancelled Vic Mignogna because he's allegedly a sexual predator, and the other camp that cancelled Monica Rial, who made these claims, and everyone else who was on Monica's side, because she can't stand the success of someone else, and she's making false claims. And Vic Mignogna lost his job. He is not getting booked for any conventions. I honestly don't know what the guy's going to do with his life right now, because he's absolutely cancelled. No other anime dubbing team is going to take him on, and he has been in prominent roles over all these years. So the guy, like I said, I don't know the actual incident. I'm not in charge of the legal stuff, and a couple of lawyers online have given their legal analyses of what exactly this means and whether the claim is genuine or not. I'm not involved in that, but what I'm saying is that you got people canceling both the camps, and honestly nothing productive has come of this. One man has lost his job, and well, the other person and the other party has not lost their jobs, but they're getting constant hate mail and hate tweets online. So that's one example, but I have never, in my experience, found any positive ramifications that come out of cancel culture.
I mean, so before I answer your question, I have two responses to that. I mean, the first response really to me is that, especially when it comes to art, I think people should, it's an opinion I have, is that people should always separate art from the artist. For me, I don't really understand canceling a piece of art because the artist who made it did something or not, right? And I say this because one of the musicians who have been cancelled, and for reasons that I think are legitimate, is R. Kelly, right? And R. Kelly has made like music that I have liked over the years, music that I have like sentimental value attached to it, for things that have nothing to do with R. Kelly, right? But that are connected to the music. And so for me, even though like I mean personally, I won't say that I endorse R. Kelly, but like that music has a different sort of bearing for me. But then in terms of like your question specifically, can I think of instances where cancel culture has positive ramifications? So I think that I'm opposed to cancel culture at scale, right? So I'm opposed to like everyone saying like, oh, this actor did this thing, so we're gonna cancel him. But I think that to the survivor or the person who makes the claim, I think that person is entitled to cancel the person that they accuse, right? Because I think that being exposed to that person's work can be can re-traumatize them, right? Because of this experience that they have had with this individual. But I think for the rest of us who are outside of that scenario, like we are not that actress who felt violated by that voice actor, right? So I think that voice actress has a right to cancel him, because like basically like that's just a way of her enforcing her own personal boundaries and stopping herself from being re-traumatized by this incident. But I think as for everyone else, the rest of us bystanders, I think we have no reason to cancel an individual based on an incident that we have nothing to do with. And in fact, I think that cancel culture has a detrimental effect of pushing this person who's accused into the defensive, right? And for as long as they're in the defensive, they're not doing the work that they need to do to interrogate their actions and become better, and become better for people who will come down the road, right? So in the end, what I think ends up happening is that the people become defensive. They end up having a lot of resentment for the system, and therefore like they don't do the work. And so now people remember, like now people who are on his side, they're also not doing the necessary work to interrogate how his actions might have amounted to that, and how the world can improve and be a better place, right? So now we have sort of this violence cycle now, just like remaining. And so like we make no progress as a human species. So I think that the only time I can justify cancel culture is just like from the perspective of the person who felt violated. But I think like at scale, we should not be canceling people. We should be inviting them in to have dialogue, to really like work on growing from these experiences, and just really making sure that everybody moves forward together.
Wow. Okay. So basically, to summarize what you said, an individual can cancel another, but en masse, we should avoid such mass cancel culture and, basically making these generalized statements of this person is definitely evil and deserves to go to wherever and all that kind of stuff. And interesting you brought up R. Kelly, because I'm thinking of another example in the same vein, and I'll give you just the background and then we can have an analysis on it. So back in the day, and I used to listen to them as well when I was younger, there was this band from Wales called Lost Prophets, and they existed until I think 2013 or so. And the reason why they broke up was because and this is not alleged anymore because the person is actually in jail, their lead singer was convicted of basically child pornography and raping a baby, animal pornography, and all these heinous acts. And the band members, well, they didn't get cancelled. I mean, they disbanded the band and they actually joined other musical projects, so they're doing well for themselves. So people basically, they cancelled Lost Prophets, but then Lost Prophets doesn't exist anymore. But now I've seen a lot of comments online. Like you said, R. Kelly's music has some significant emotional attachment to you in a way because of the memories associated with certain songs. And it's the same with me. And a lot of the Lost Prophets songs have got nothing to do with anything sexual for that matter, because, well, they tackle a lot of subjects for that matter, but it's very seldom do you find anything sexual in there? But now people are like, well, all of Lost Prophet songs are tainted, so we're not going to listen to them. I mean, I understand the band members, the former band members of the Lost Prophets have said that we're not going to play any music from the Lost Prophets anymore because for us it's just a very bad memory and we don't want to reignite those flames anymore. And the guy who did it, he was their childhood friend. Lost Prophets has been a thing for a good while, so they don't want to go through that pain anymore. But would you say it's ethical for fans or former fans of the Lost Prophets to listen to the old music of the Lost Prophets, or would you rather we stay away from it entirely and go to something else?
So I mentioned earlier that one of the things that I consider myself is that I think of myself as an artist, as a creator of art. And one of the things that I have learned about art is that, you see, art is a collective creation, right? Like, of course, you have the main artist who is creating, in this case, say Lost Prophets. They create these songs with this meaning that they have or motivation that they have, right? But you, as a consumer of the art, when you engage with that art, it's not the same piece that the owner created, because you are bringing your own experience into it. You are engaging with that art like from your own lens, and therefore you are becoming a co-creator in the consumption of this art. And it is my personal belief that for that reason, I think there is no ethical question there. Like, people can still continue listening to the music, because like that music means something different to them than it did to the people who created the music. But also, like, some people might choose not to listen to the music, perhaps as a form of protest against that thing. I mean, those people are also entitled to it, but I think that the people who make the individual choice to not listen to that music should not chastise the people who choose to continue listening to that music, because like, as I said, art is a collaborative process, and it's not owned by the artist.
Absolutely.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, you nailed it on the head. Whenever I record a new episode, I always say this is the best one yet. But honestly speaking, I'm not shilling for you, but this does sound like the best one yet because your takes are very mature and very practical at that. So if you were dreaming to change the world, as you might have slipped up on during the course of this episode, I think you're well on your way to doing it, brother, because I absolutely find myself in agreement with you that whichever camp you find yourself on, canceling the other camp is not going to get you anywhere unless you definitely have a personal stake in it. Then it's best to stay away from cancel culture. And wow, we've talked about a lot of topics and for almost more than an hour now, but to bring this back home, and by home I mean our home, which is Botswana, and you explicitly mentioned to me in our pre-episode discussion that you wanted to have an earnest discussion about some of the situations we find ourselves here in Botswana. Well, we praise God that cancel culture isn't so much of a thing here. At least I'm not hearing of it as much as, like I mentioned, in the cases of the Lost Prophets or R. Kelly or in the United States in general. But there are other problems, other issues, if I can put it that way, here that we need to address. And the one you wanted to talk about in particular was the issue of youth unemployment and our response as the young generation, the young people of Botswana, whether our response is appropriate to this issue that we find in front of us. What is your take on all this?
I think sort of, I guess, as a transition, I'll start by saying this, that, I recently came across a statistic that said that, Botswana is a country that has very high rape statistics. And I think that, at least this is like, I guess my plea to the nation and to other, fellow Botswana is that, I think we should all do our part in unlearning, the toxic masculinity that the patriarchy has taught us. Like, and by us, I'm talking about us men, but also us women, and everybody else. Um, because I think that, we have a culture in Botswana of, sweeping these kinds of issues under the rug and not confronting them head on. But I do hope, that we will we will do our part, at an individual level. I think these things, we should always start them at a personal level, interrogate our own actions. But now transitioning on to the issue of youth unemployment in Botswana. I think one of the things that, deeply saddened me is the fact that we have such high statistics of youth unemployment. Like every year we have qualified, graduates from our universities who have no jobs to transition into, and perhaps, for a large part because, when we were growing up, there's this whole belief that you're going to go to university, you're going to finish university, then you're going to get a job, right? And then the latest trend, because I think some of these things are trends, now the latest trend is entrepreneurship, right? So now people are seeing entrepreneurship as sort of like this magic wand that is going to solve all the problems. So now everybody is an entrepreneur. I think like everyone is selling Herbalife in Inuka or something, or everyone is now trying to apply for money at CEDA. And I also feel like even that in itself is not going to solve all of these things. And I think that it makes me really sad that as Botswana, at least this is my personal opinion, is I feel that we tend to be very entitled and overly dependent on the government, and that is very dangerous. So it's dangerous in the sense that we expect the government to figure out solution to this youth unemployment problem and to many other problems that we face. But it's also dangerous because I think we have become very complacent and we don't hold our political leaders accountable, right? And I think part of it is because of this over dependence. Anytime you try to some people try to protest against the state of affairs, right? The pushback is usually like the government or the leaders, they come and they tell you about the privilege we have of having access to education, for free access to free healthcare, all these different things that they do, which are actually commendable. But I think we forget that our leaders are not doing us any favors by providing all these social welfare structures. They're not doing us any favors, right? They are actually doing what we mandated them to do. We elected them into those positions to manage our resources, to sort of make sure that they build these structures for our society. So they are not doing us any favors. We are actually they are accountable to us, right? And so we have every single right in the world to go after them and demand better. But I think even more than that, I think we need to stop just being idle and being passive participant in the political process, right? I think that we need to be involved at a level where, we actually speak with our representatives, share with them our key concerns and our needs, such that they're able to put them forward in the parliament. I think one recent development in Botswana that I really like is that now parliamentary proceedings have been televised. I think that's a great development in the sense that we are now able to see what our legislators are debating in parliament, what issues they are championing or not championing, and I hope that we'll use this newfound information to punish and reward our politicians who are performing or underperforming, right? So, for example, if our leaders, don't stand up for issues that matters to us, we should know that we can actually vote those people out of office, right? Because personally, I think that government providing all this like money and making it easy to get SIDA money is not going to solve the youth unemployment problem, because a lot of these issues that we have are structural, right? Because in a lot of ways, I think government is crowding out the private sector. So the private sector in Botswana is underdeveloped, and for various reasons. But I think by and large, government policies allow for monopolies to exist in certain industries where they shouldn't. And then in other places, I think the government itself is crowding out the market, right? Because if you have the government as your market and also as your source of funding, then I don't think that's a healthy or a sustainable system. So I think that there's a lot that needs to be done, but I think that we really need to put a lot of pressure on our leaders to rethink our education system, whether our education system is really serving everyone. Like, does it make sense to have everyone go to university and get all these different degrees and then go, have the degrees accumulate dust? Or should we have more vocational schools in some cases where some people can go get these vocational skills? Is government policies around trying to enable entrepreneurship really helping people? How are we and are we serving ourselves by having people? Because I feel like, for example, one of the key, I guess, things that I have a problem with is sort of this over dependence. Personally, I think that people should have some investment in their education. I'll give education as the example to illustrate this point. And is that I think that we shouldn't have free education. And the reason for this is that I think that people need to have some skin in the game, because it's only when you have skin in the game that you can actually push for reform in the education system so that it serves you, but also that you can actually make sure that you get something out of that. Now, I know that a common pushback against, if education is not free, then you're going to exclude those people from underprivileged backgrounds. But that is not the case. What I'm proposing, am I proposing this? Yeah, I think what I'm proposing is that we should start paying for education in Botswana. And those people from families who cannot afford to, we should continue to have the same social structure. I mean, the support structure, where we make sure that their economic level or class does not, class them out of the education, or does not close them out of the accessing education. But I think for the vast majority of people in the middle class who can afford to pay, I think they should be made to pay for it so that they can be invested in it.
Wow, absolutely.
Yeah, but really, yeah, it's a big problem. And I don't think that there are simple solutions to youth unemployment, but I think it's going to require a lot of structural overhauling. And I think that people should really, lobby the government. There should be activism to have these structures changed, I think.
Okay, so if you were in a position of power in the government, for example, what would you do as a matter of first priority right now to overhaul our education system, perhaps, or to overhaul the problem of youth unemployment?
Damn, putting me on the spot, brother. I like that.
Well, you did it to me, so.
Yeah, I like that. So, I think an issue that I have identified, with the trying to use entrepreneurship as a solution to youth unemployment, is that we just throw a lot of money at people with no business experience, people with no business discipline. So I think the first thing that I would do is to transform the whole SIDA. So if you look at the local enterprise authority, you look at SIDA, and then you look at Botswana Innovation Hub, I think that I don't see why we should have them as like three separate entities. I think, and what I would do is I would consolidate, these different structures, and make sure that businesses that get funding from the government, they have mentorship and really support along the way, but also I wouldn't give them like this money as like grants or like loans. It would be like just like equity investment, and I would have the same expectations that I would have of like if I was investing in a business that was not like a youth owned business, right? Because I think that if we relax the rules, we almost make it seem as though um, you know, it can be easy to create a youth-owned business. This also means that if a particular market is already saturated, then I'm not going to continue funding more people to start a chicken, like rearing chicken business. I'm not going to fund more people to start rearing goats or to have car washes if there's already enough car washes in a place. Because I think that we also have to think about creating a market where everything that's produced can be bought, right? And I think that the other thing that I would do is I would really focus on because Botswana has a small population, right? So its market is very limited, right? So I think I would put a lot of emphasis on trying to support local businesses and entities to have export quality produce, right? And I think that in Botswana we have a tendency when we're thinking about exports, we are oftentimes talking about exporting to European Union, exporting to the US, whatever. I think that we are missing out on exporting to neighboring countries in the Saku region, but also like to other African countries, right? I think that if I was in a position of power, I would really also also lobby regionally, just like to facilitate exports from Botswana to be able to reach other African countries, right? Because I think that we have a tendency to idolize the West as like where the best things are, or where we should be selling our things or aspiring to sell our things, when actually that's not the case. I think we should be working to really build these ecosystems within the continent, and really to because I think Africa's growth can only be sustainable if it comes from within. I think we can still work with external partners, but I think the bulk of the work should come from within. So I think, yeah, so my main focus would just be to sum it up. My main focus would be to provide structures and ecosystem that really support the entrepreneur, instead of just throwing money at them and sort of like leaving them to drown. I would like really make sure that they have coaching to do this thing, but also to just really build structures to try and tap the larger African market. Yeah, I think those would be like great starting points for me. With respect to education, how would I overhaul the education system? I mean, I think for starters, I would one of the things that I think needs to be done is, I think I understand having everyone do the same subjects from like primary school. I mean, in primary school, but I think from the time you get to junior secondary school, I think by then kids already have a pretty good idea of what things they're good at, what things they think they like, and I think I would advocate for specialized junior secondary schools. So and really making sure that students are supported in primary school to have a better idea of what they want, what they are interested in. And so like instead of having kids who are really bad at science, like have their confidence dragged to the ground because they're struggling with science and maths, when they can actually be like doing other things like design and technology or art or more creative things. So I would have like junior secondary schools where students can specialize in the arts, where students can specialize in the sciences, where students can specialize in like the languages and things like that. And I think
Would it be appropriate at that stage though? Because if I can give my own personal experience, Form 1 and 2, I was geared towards sciences, right? Form 3 onwards, that's when I made the proper shift to the arts and the humanities, and that's where I really allowed myself to shine. And if I was in one of these specialized junior schools as you propose, I would have probably been veered off to a different direction. And that's not to say that's necessarily bad, but I've found myself to be more authentic in the setting that I am in now as opposed to what I was back then. It's not that I am unable to grasp scientific and mathematical concepts, it's just that I enjoy arts and humanities more, and that I only found out Form 3 onwards because of a variety of factors. But if I was in a specialized school, would I be so privileged?
Yeah, so I mean, that is a valid critique and pushback, and thanks for bringing it up, right? And I think that, you know, the question of like at what point would be the right time to introduce this, you know, specialized education. I think it's a question that, you know, obviously, like I can't say like, oh, I'm 100% sure like it should be junior school, right? I think in a position of power, I'll definitely consult the experts as to like when it's ideal. But I think that it's important that in primary school, you're already sort of supporting the students to be able to make this decision. So the point that you bring about like how our interests evolve over time is actually an important one, and actually brings me to my other point, right? Which is, even in these specialized, specialized schools, there should always be a broader contextualization of the different things that people learn in society, right? Because the world we live in is a very interconnected and interdisciplinary world. And it is a fact that as people, interests are ever evolving. But I do think that the value to having these specialized schools is that, you know, either somebody realizes that they're pretty good at something and they're like, you know, they get deeper into it pretty quickly, or they also realize pretty soon that actually I don't like this as much as I think I do, and they're able to switch. And I think that, in fact, now that I'm reflecting on it, based on your pushback, I think maybe another alternative, you know, taking advantage of Botswana's like a 3-step, you know, basic education process where you have primary school, junior secondary, and then senior secondary school. One of the ways you can do it is primary school, everybody does everything. And then junior secondary school, they sort of like semi-specialization. So like you can still like have like some emphasis, but you still have exposure to other things. And then senior secondary school is where like now you go like full on like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. But I think at the heart of it is that we shouldn't decide and then like just stick to it entirely, right? I think a good education system is one that is continuously being reviewed to see whether or not it meets the needs of the students that it serves, whether or not it continues to be appropriate. So I think that that's what I would do as a starting point, but I would also ensure that there are mechanisms in place for regular review so that we don't just continue with something because we've always done it that way, right? To make sure that we continue to learn on the insights we're gathering.
All right, so when the time comes, I encourage all the viewers to make their own decisions, of course, but I recommend that when the time comes that you vote for Tumisang Ramarea as the MP of Kanye East. I mean, that is where you're from, right?
Yeah, you know? Yeah, one day, please keep me in your heart and vote for me.
Absolutely. So, we've been going on for 90 minutes, the duration of a football game. It's been such an honor, a pleasure to host you today, brother. We've talked about your journey to the West. I'm probably going to call this episode that. We talked about a very, I wouldn't say painful, but a very touchy and sensitive subject, not only for you, but to the world in general. And we concluded by talking about Botswana and a glaring problem that faces us. Are there any parting thoughts that you had? Perhaps you have some last words for our viewers, whoever and whatever they may be, whichever walk of life they may be from, whether they be from Botswana or from the US of A or from Costa Rica or anywhere else in the world. What would you like them to remember?
I mean, first of all, you know, thanks for inviting me and thanks for having me. I mean, it has been a privilege and an honor to be on your show. I think my parting words is, you know, I think that injustice is a form of violence, and I think we all have a collective responsibility to play, um, to end the violence that is endemic in our society. But I think those of us who have been endowed with more privilege under the status quo have an even bigger role to play, right? And I'm sure like we've already illustrated it when I was talking about my journey to the West. Talking about how, as a child, as a kid from like a low income family, and how my teachers used that position of privilege to really support my aspiration and help me, really escape out of that economic status. And also we've touched a bit on this also when we're talking about the whole cancel culture and doing the work that's necessary to unlearn the toxic masculinity. It's sort of this recognition that we all have a role to play, but as men we have a bigger role because oftentimes we're perpetrators, but we all should play something. And then lastly, also it's been illustrated in this point of youth unemployment, is that we all have a role to play in really fighting this, but our leaders, because they have more privilege, they have an even bigger role to play, and so we should hold them accountable. So I think for each one of us, my parting words is, I'll just say we should stay curious and really interrogate our role in upholding these institutions that perpetuate injustice, and do the work that we need to do to really overcome it, but also to realize, I think, to approach that process of unlearning with a lot of self-compassion, because I think that that unlearning is not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and sometimes you're going to recognize that there's something that you do that is not okay, but it's not as easy as ABC to say, okay, this is wrong, I'm going to switch and do it this way. Like change doesn't happen overnight. So to also have some self-compassion, and to show yourself some kindness and grace as you go through that process. But it is my hope, that you as a listener out there, you remain committed to advancing justice for all, because I think justice is something that really is important. So thank you, my brother, for having me and for allowing me to share my views and thoughts on these different topics.
Anytime. And as I have told you before, inshallah, if God wills, this is the first of many to come. Because with you being who you are, I can't just let you off the hook like that. And when you do come back home, whenever that may be, of course, I owe you a treat whenever I come to Gab's next. And okay, we have to do something other than Main Mall, because unfortunately there's nothing halal left in Main Mall. But hey, it's all right. I've got a car, so we'll find another spot.
We'll figure something out. Yeah. Oh, I can even come to like the greater Palape zone,
Oh, absolutely, because Palape is growing, and well, I don't know when this will be released. It'll definitely be released before the end of 2020, Lord willing. But we may be having the first halal KFC in Palape. So
all right.
So things to look forward to. But
exactly.
Yeah. So, brother Tumisang, where can the viewers find you if they want to either get in contact with you or see some of the other things that you're involved in? What's the best way to get a hold of you, or to at least view your work?
I think the best place to find me is on my website. It's www.ramarea.com. So RAMAREA.com. And I think of it as my digital embassy to the world. And I think, that's basically the best place to find me. Obviously, you can find me on Facebook. I have a page, Tumisang Ramarea. And I think that's probably like the like my main public facing social media platform. So they can find me there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you took a break off of most social media things not too long ago. I was actually surprised to see you back on Facebook. But I guess.
Oh yeah. Man, it was a great great time being away. Actually, I took that break following that sexual harassment accusation. I think. It was a really great time to be away from all the noise of the world and just to focus on what makes me tick, and really on like understanding my journey and myself. And like now it's good to come back, because now I have better understanding of like how I want to engage with these platforms.
Amazing, amazing. So we'll leave all the links down below in the description. Thank you once again. I can't thank you enough for coming onto my show and gracing us. I hope that this message will be spread and broadcasted to the world at large and spread far and wide, so that a lot of people can get to access the wisdom that you have imparted today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know how many times I can be able to thank you. We have to at least make our effort to thank you, but I know it's not enough. But thank you for coming onto my show once again.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All right. So, dear viewers, dear listeners, I hope that was intriguing for you. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you definitely benefited from the wisdom of this young man named Tumisang Ramarea. If you have any comments, do let us know below on any of our platforms. Get in touch with our social media. Follow Tumisang. He's got a YouTube as well, I should mention. I don't know if he likes to publicize that, but I believe you can find his TED Talk there. If you cannot do that, I'll just leave it down below, linked, so you can access the TED Talk and see what else he's got happening on his YouTube channel. But until next time, we'll take our leave for now. We've been going on for longer than a football match. But, dear viewers, we greet you in the name of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Until next time.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, you reached the end. Well done. I guess I'll give you a little bit of a prize by reminding you to like, share, and subscribe to our relevant channels. Follow us on all our social media platforms. If you're using Apple Podcasts, do leave us a 5-star rating. And if you think we've earned it, we'd appreciate a one-time donation on Ko-fi or a longer pledge on Patreon. Until next time, stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum.